What if the government's most secure military installations aren't just protecting us from foreign threats, but from something far more terrifying? Deep in the southwestern United States, behind layers of security clearances and classified documents, lies a story so disturbing that it was buried under mountains of paperwork and official denials. But in the summer of 2024, one such facility faced a threat that no amount of conventional security could contain, something that moved like shadows through their defenses, leaving behind evidence that challenged everything we think we know about what's possible. The Ironwood Base incident, as it's now known in classified circles, began like many government cover-ups, with unusual sightings, dismissed reports, and nervous whispers among personnel. But unlike other stories that fade into conspiracy theories, this one left behind a trail of evidence, security footage, physical specimens, and traumatized witnesses whose accounts all point to the same chilling conclusion.
Secrets of the Woods.
I've spent the better part of my life in uniform, beginning as a wide-eyed recruit fresh out of a small Midwest town, dreaming of jets and adventure. Fast forward 30 years, and I'm Colonel James Caldwell of the United States Air Force, commander of Ironwood Base, an installation so remote, most GPS maps don't even list it by name. Officially, it's a flight testing and reconnaissance support facility. Unofficially, we handle a myriad of special projects that rarely see the light of day. Over the course of my career, I've witnessed all sorts of bizarre phenomena: experimental craft, black ops technology, hush-hush drones that defy conventional aerodynamics. But none of that prepared me for the events that unfolded in the summer of 2024. That was when we discovered we were not alone under the endless desert skies. That was when we first encountered the bat-like humanoid creatures that would change everything I knew about national security and the limits of rational explanation. Ironwood Base sits in a rugged desert expanse in the southwestern United States, ringed by craggy mesas and thick stands of Joshua trees. The sun there is relentless, scorching the tarmac by midday. The nights can be eerily quiet, dominated by howling winds that sweep across the plains. We have a small complement of around 300 personnel: airmen, civilian specialists, a rotating roster of intelligence officers, and a minimal security unit. On paper, it's listed as an auxiliary test range for drones and advanced avionics. The real purpose is far more complex. We support classified research programs, from advanced propulsion to exotic materials analysis, gleaned from who knows where. We also occasionally house detainees who need to be kept off the grid, but that's an entirely different conversation. I took command of Ironwood 3 years prior. My predecessor, Colonel Harriet Rhodes, warned me that the base had a history: strange sightings on the perimeter, mysterious lights in the sky, unexplained equipment malfunctions. She chalked most of it up to local legends or weather anomalies. I listened politely, but in the back of my mind, I wrote it off as typical Area 51-style gossip. Little did I know how right she was to be uneasy. The first 6 months of my command were routine. We tested a new line of stealth drones, tracked telemetry, and ran closed-circuit flight drills. Personnel rotated in and out with minimal fuss. Then, in mid-2022, we started receiving hush-hush shipments from higher HQ. Crates labeled only with numerical codes, accompanied by thick wads of documentation that indicated the shipments were biologically sensitive. Typically, only the labs up at Wright-Patterson handle those requests. But apparently, we had the space, the secrecy, and the clearance. My staff and I turned a blind eye, trusting that the big brass had reasons to divert these items here. It was early July 2024 when we got our first sign that something was amiss. Temperatures had soared over 110 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire week, and we'd had unusual fluctuations in the base's power grid. At 0200 one morning, an alarm blared from the southwestern perimeter fence. A sensor trip, indicative of a breach. I rushed to the security office, where Master Sergeant Amanda Reyes, my head of security, was pulling up the live feed. We saw something large flitting across the camera's view, so fast that the motion-activated lens struggled to focus. The figure soared from left to right, then up into the darkness. Reyes replayed the footage, frame by frame. All we could make out was a silhouette with outstretched wings. At first, we assumed it was a large vulture or hawk, but the wingspan looked enormous, easily 10 feet or more. Hawks don't typically set off the sensor arrays, Reyes muttered, brow furrowed. The arrays detect movement above a certain mass threshold. Usually only human-sized or large animal intruders trigger an alert. It made no sense for a simple bird to cause that kind of reading. Reyes dispatched a security patrol to check the perimeter, but they found no sign of damage or forced entry. That same night, the base veterinarian, yes, we keep a small veterinary unit for canine security teams, reported a strange disturbance. Her name was Dr. Chloe Yang, and she'd heard frantic barking from the kennel around the same time the perimeter sensors went off. 2 of our guard dogs were so spooked they wouldn't leave their cages. They trembled and growled at the night sky as if expecting an attack from above. The next morning, we put it all down to a possible large bird. The official log read, "Perimeter alarm triggered by probable vulture or desert owl. No breach confirmed." But as I signed off, my gut told me we were dealing with something else. I instructed Reyes to keep a closer eye on the southwestern fence and authorized an additional sensor sweep. Meanwhile, we carried on. Within days, more oddities cropped up. Strange scorch marks. Maintenance teams found elongated scorch marks on the runway at dawn, singed patches of concrete that appeared in random patterns. They resembled claw-like shapes, as if large talons or some superheated apparatus had come into contact with the ground. My first thought was sabotage or mischief, but we had no intruders on record, and no aircraft had landed overnight. Missing livestock. A local rancher in the neighboring county reported that several goats had vanished, leaving behind an enclosure fence torn from the top. While this might not usually fall under our purview, the local sheriff occasionally shared intel with us, given our presence in the region. The fence's tier marks were odd, wide spacing, parallel lines, almost like giant rake marks. Spooked pilots. 2 flight crews returning from a nighttime drone test claimed they saw fleeting winged shapes passing in front of their aircraft's landing lights. One pilot even radioed the tower mid-flight, insisting that something was pacing them at about 700 feet off the ground. The tower, baffled, saw nothing on radar. As these incidents stacked up, a sense of unease settled over the base. Whispers spread among enlisted personnel about gargoyles in the desert, or even demons with wings. I tried to quash the rumors, reminding everyone we were an Air Force installation, not a ghost story camp. But I couldn't ignore that something was happening, something beyond our usual logistical or security challenges. I requested higher HQ's assistance, perhaps a specialized team from the Office of Special Investigations, OSI, could help. The response I got was radio silence for a solid week, which only heightened my suspicion. If we were dealing with a threat, we needed resources. But none came. By mid-July, Nighttime patrols reported hearing odd screeches or high-pitched chittering noises emanating from the desert beyond the base perimeter. Searchlights would pan across the sands, occasionally catching fleeting movements, something darting behind rocks or cresting a small rise. The figures always vanished before proper identification could be made. The only clue was the swirling dust and the tension in the guard dogs' stances. Then came the moment everything escalated. On July 21st, a young airman named Davis was assigned night watch in the southwestern quadrant. Around 0300, he failed to check in for a scheduled radio call. Reyes, worried, sent out a security detail. They found him near the chain-link fence, unconscious, uniform torn, but otherwise alive. Davis's face was pale, drenched in sweat, and a single deep scratch ran across his forearm, as though inflicted by a large claw. He was rushed to the base infirmary. When Davis came to, his eyes were wild with shock. He stammered about hearing flapping wings overhead, and a monstrous shape that descended in front of him. He insisted it grabbed him briefly, trying to drag him upward before dropping him. He believed if he hadn't fought back, it might have carried him off entirely. I listened to his account with dread. It sounded insane, but the evidence on his body was real enough. Dr. Yang confirmed the laceration was unlike any she'd seen from common animals. The spacing between the claw marks was larger than a typical big cat or coyote. That same day, I received a coded message from an OSI liaison. They'd heard rumors of unexplained aerial phenomena at Ironwood and recommended we handle it internally for the time being. No official team was en route. No extra support was offered. I was left with the uneasy feeling that maybe HQ knew more about these intruders than they let on. It wouldn't be the first time that secrets ran deep in the chain of command. Spurred by Davis's attack, we launched a systematic search for clues. Under Reyes's command, security teams combed the perimeter at dusk, armed with thermal imaging scopes and bright floodlights. We found some footprints. A bizarre shape, best described as an elongated foot, with what looked like a protruding talon at the heel. The prints suggested a bipedal stance, but the stride was uneven and occasionally punctuated by deep impressions, as though the creature launched itself into flight. Speculation ran rampant. Some believed we were dealing with an unknown species, a large mutated bat or a prehistoric avian predator. Others whispered about extraterrestrials, pointing out that we do handle off-world technology at times. Still others, mostly older staff, insisted it was some local cryptid rumored in Native American legends. A few cynics thought it was a hoax by staff bored out of their minds, but Davis's injury and the footprints put an end to that theory. I arranged a meeting with my department heads, Dr. Yang, veterinarian, Captain Osborne, head of flight ops, Reyes, security chief, and Lieutenant Paul Duke, our intelligence liaison. We gathered in a secure conference room, glass walls frosted for privacy, the overhead fluorescent lights humming quietly. Dr. Yang laid out her analysis of the claw marks. Look at the puncture depth here. She pointed to an enlarged photo of Davis's wound. The angle suggests a downward grip, and the width of the hand or paw, whatever it is, exceeds that of any known raptor in this region. If I had to guess, it's something bigger and more dexterous than typical bird talons. Captain Osborne frowned. We've seen them in flight, at least according to our test pilot's accounts. If they can pace an aircraft at 700 feet, that implies significant wing power. Either they have some extraordinary muscle structure or they're making use of thermals. He paused, tapping a pen on the table, but nighttime thermals here are weak. These creatures must be generating their own lift with massive wings. Reyes showed the footprints on the overhead screen. These were found near the southwestern fence. They're consistent with, well, something upright. Possibly an extended foot with a rear talon. We've never seen anything like it. But if it's comfortable on two legs, then it's not just a mindless animal. Lieutenant Duke added quietly, I've tried to cross-reference these details with intel archives. There have been rumors of sightings like this near certain black site facilities in other parts of the country. Things that got hush-hushed real quick. Our superiors might be burying similar reports. As the meeting ended, we had more questions than answers. One thing was certain. We had a genuine threat that was physically powerful and cunning, capable of evading advanced detection systems, and it seemed drawn to our base for reasons unknown. Given the severity of the situation, I authorized a covert night operation, Operation Vigilance. We'd deploy small squads around the perimeter, equipped with night vision, infrared scopes, and non-lethal weapons like tranquilizer rifles and net launchers. The goal was to capture, or at least get close visual confirmation of one of these creatures. A standard shoot-to-kill policy seemed premature without fully understanding what we were dealing with. Plus, if it was an undiscovered species, we wanted it alive for study if possible. On the night of July 25th, we set up a multi-layered ambush. Quietly, teams took up positions around the southwestern perimeter, as that seemed to be the creature's preferred entry point. The desert air was still, and the half-moon cast long shadows across the sands. My command post was inside a reinforced observation tower. From there, I monitored the feeds from each squad's helmet cams. For hours, we heard nothing but the occasional desert breeze. At 0300, just when we were about to call it a night, a muffled shout crackled over the radio from Squad Bravo. They'd picked up movement near a rocky outcrop. The cameras jerked around, capturing a fleeting glimpse of a tall, winged figure stepping into the open. With shocking speed, it launched itself skyward. The entire squad saw it silhouetted against the moon for a moment. Broad, leathery wings, a torso shaped almost like a lanky human's, and elongated limbs ending in what looked like taloned feet. The head was difficult to make out, but it had pointed ears or horns, and the sense of a muzzle or snout. Chaos ensued. The squad fired a volley of tranquilizer darts, but the creature twisted in midair, evading with inhuman agility. Another winged form swooped in from behind the outcrop, momentarily landing on a large boulder. The cameras caught the glint of large reflective eyes. The second creature shrieked, a piercing, high note that made the squad's audio feed spike into the red. The dogs with the security teams went ballistic, straining at their handlers' leashes. Then both creatures took flight, splitting in different directions. Squad Bravo tried to pursue, but within seconds, the sky was empty. Floodlights swung wildly, capturing only swirling dust. The entire encounter lasted maybe 30 seconds, enough to confirm we were dealing with multiple entities, not just a lone specimen, and that they possessed keen situational awareness and speed. Not a single dart found its mark. When the squads regrouped, we tallied the damage. No injuries this time, though a guard dog had broken its collar in panic. The vantage from the cameras left little doubt. We had something akin to bat people, tall, agile, and unbelievably quick. The official after-action report was classified. Operation Vigilance had ended with no capture, but an indisputable recording of these beings. Reyes and I prepared a comprehensive package: thermal imagery, the footprints cast, the video footage. We sent it via secure channels to higher HQ, urging immediate assistance. Days dragged on with no official reply. Tensions soared. Rumors spread that maybe the government already knew about these creatures and had stationed them or studied them in or around Ironwood. Some staff believed the creatures were escapes from one of our black projects. Others insisted they had an underground lair somewhere in the desert. At last, we got word that a single specialist was being sent, a certain Major Elaine Cartwright from an intelligence branch so obscure her uniform bore no standard insignia. She arrived in a dusty black SUV, flanked by two silent men in suits who stayed out of sight. Cartwright wasted no time. She marched into my office in crisp fatigues and demanded all our data on the creatures. Her questions were direct and sometimes unsettling. Have these entities displayed intelligence beyond evasion tactics? Have they attempted communication? Has there been any sign of nesting? When I pressed her about her background, she merely stated, "I'm with a specialized intelligence unit that handles anomalous threats." She wouldn't elaborate further. Over the next few days, she scoured the base, interrogating personnel who had direct contact or sightings. She spent hours reviewing the lab equipment we'd stored for HQ's hush-hush shipments, cross-referencing timelines. By the end of the week, she called a meeting in the briefing room. "What you're seeing here at Ironwood," Cartwright began, "isn't the first instance. There have been sporadic reports of similar winged humanoids near certain remote facilities over the last decade. They remain elusive. We suspect they're either an undiscovered terrestrial species or possibly the product of genetic experimentation. Some of my superiors believe they may be drawn to electromagnetic fields or certain chemical byproducts from advanced research labs. I can't confirm specifics. That is above even my pay grade. But I can tell you this: they are extremely dangerous, and they tend to escalate their behavior when threatened." Her words sent a chill through the room. If these creatures had been sighted at other installations, why had no one warned us sooner? Cartwright concluded by saying she had the authority to deploy more advanced methods for containing the threat, though she wanted to see if we could handle it with minimal force, to avoid a fiasco that might draw public attention. It dawned on me that she might be here to cover up the situation as much as to solve it. Unbeknownst to us, the creatures seemed to be growing bolder. Over the following week, we had a rash of incidents. Transformer attack. Late one night, the main transformer on the southwestern perimeter was found torn open, cables ripped from their moorings. It resulted in a partial power outage. Security cameras caught fleeting images of two shapes descending upon the structure, methodically dismantling it. It looked disturbingly organized, not just random vandalism. Lab infiltration. On two separate occasions, motion sensors in an unused lab building, which once housed some of those hush-hush crates, were tripped. Guards arrived too late, finding only open vents and scratches on the walls. The building's interior reeked of ammonia. Dr. Yang later posited that the odor might be associated with these creatures' bodily processes. Personnel terror. Several enlisted airmen claimed they saw the creatures perched on rooftops or towers at night, glaring down with reflective eyes. One guard literally fled his post in terror. I had to discipline him, but secretly, I empathized. The sense of being watched by something alien, something that could swoop in at any moment, was unnerving. At this point, the base's morale was at rock bottom. The mess hall buzzed with fear. Sleep deprivation ran high as staff dreaded the nights. Even routine tasks like refueling jets or patrolling the perimeter carried a sense of impending danger. Major Cartwright proposed we go on the offensive, locate the creature's lair in the nearby desert canyons, and neutralize them. She believed we could track them at dusk to see where they flew off to roost. Dr. Yang was against lethal measures. We still don't know what they are, she argued. They might be a species we can reason with, or at least study. I, too, was torn. On one hand, I didn't want more wounded airmen. On the other, the idea of slaughtering possibly intelligent beings didn't sit right with me either. Ultimately, we agreed on a compromise: a reconnaissance mission outside the base to find the creature's possible nesting ground. If confrontation became necessary, we'd use non-lethal methods first. Lieutenant Duke volunteered for the mission, claiming he'd had field experience tracking insurgents in rugged terrain overseas. We formed a 4-person team: Duke, 2 special ops airmen proficient in survival, and Dr. Yang for her biological expertise. They geared up with night vision, tranquilizer rifles, sidearms, and cameras. Their plan was to depart the base at dusk in a Humvee, heading toward the rocky canyons to the southwest. I set up a command center back at Ironwood, a portable satellite link on the edge of the perimeter where the team's transmissions came in. Dusk fell, painting the sky in a kaleidoscope of orange and purple. The desert wind moaned, carrying gritty dust. The team advanced into the canyons, carefully scanning for signs: footprints, droppings, scrapes on rock faces. For hours, the only discovery was a labyrinth of narrow passes, cacti, and occasional desert wildlife. Around 2,300, they found something: a small hidden cave entrance behind a tumble of boulders. The ground outside was littered with half-eaten carcasses, rabbits, a coyote skull, goat remains that might have been from that rancher's missing livestock. Deep scratch marks scored the rocky ground. The stench of ammonia and rot wafted out from within. Dr. Yang's voice crackled over the comm. "We've definitely found something. This looks like a feeding site or maybe a nest, going in carefully." We watched her helmet cam feed as they slipped through the cave opening. Inside, the temperature was cooler, the walls glistening with moisture. The cameras caught glimpses of straw-like material in one recess, clumps of fur or hair plastered to the walls. The deeper they went, the more my spine tingled. There were odd, high-pitched squeaks echoing from somewhere ahead, as if from multiple throats. Then, the cameras flickered. Static buzzed in our earpieces. Suddenly, Duke's voice cut through. Movement on the left, behind that rock. The camera panned, revealing a shadow that scrambled up the wall with unnatural agility. The feed shook violently as the team readied their rifles. One of the airmen fired a tranquilizer dart, but the figure disappeared into the darkness with startling speed. Within seconds, more shapes rushed the team, tall, winged, their eyes reflecting back in the camera's night vision. One creature let out a piercing shriek, and the feed erupted in static-laced chaos. Dr. Yang's voice rose in terror. "There's too many! Fall back! Fall back!" I heard a flurry of shots, some tranquilizer, some lethal rounds. The team's flashlight beams flailed across the cave walls, illuminating fleeting glimpses of leathery wings and glistening fangs. One of the airmen screamed that something had grabbed his leg. The team scrambled toward the exit, with creatures clawing at them from all sides. Duke's camera glimpsed a large black silhouette lunging from above, knocking him to the ground. He fired point blank, the muzzle flash lighting a horrifying visage. A creature's face, Bat-like snout, rows of sharp teeth, large pointed ears. It recoiled from the gunshot, screeching in pain. Then the camera feed toppled as Duke ran. Somehow, they made it outside. The last thing the command center saw was them stumbling into the moonlit desert, dragging an injured airman with a bleeding leg. A creature soared out of the cave behind them, wings spread wide, but the team fired a barrage that forced it back. Then the feed cut. We mobilized immediately. Major Cartwright, Reyes, and I hopped into 2 heavily armed Humvees with reinforcements and roared toward the canyon. Our headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating swirling dust. When we found the recon team, they were huddled near a ridge, panting and shaking. The wounded airman's leg was shredded, but not severed. Dr. Yang had stabilized him with field dressings. The others had minor cuts. They looked shell-shocked. We got ambushed. At least half a dozen of them, maybe more. Duke gasped. They're nesting in that cave system. Cartwright's expression was grim. We can't let them remain there. They'll continue to hunt and possibly come for the base again. However, the immediate priority was to evac the wounded. With dawn approaching, we decided to withdraw and regroup. Cartwright insisted we plan a final operation to eliminate the threat. Her words, not mine. Back at the base, tensions rose to a fever pitch. Cartwright wanted an immediate strike. She proposed using incendiary devices to collapse or burn the creature's cave system. This is a matter of national security, she said. We can't risk them spreading beyond the desert or exposing themselves to the public. It'd be chaos. Dr. Yang was vehemently opposed. We have no idea if they're truly malicious or just protecting territory. We intruded into their nesting area. They were defending themselves. She pointed out that the diet they seemed to follow, livestock, small animals, didn't necessarily indicate they were systematically hunting humans. The initial attacks on our perimeter might have been triggered by base activity or the presence of top-secret materials. I found myself torn. Our priority is to protect our personnel and the base, no question. But the notion of systematically wiping out what could be an undiscovered species weighed on my conscience. We have to be sure there's no alternative, I told Cartwright. If we can drive them off or set up a deterrent, that might be enough. Cartwright wouldn't budge. We tried deterrence. We tried non-lethal capture. They're too numerous and too dangerous. We have to neutralize them before they strike again. She began making calls to her superiors, referencing protocols for emergent cryptid containment and Delta-level clearance. The more I heard, the more I realized these creatures might not be the first time the government dealt with something that defied standard classification. At 1800 hours the next evening, Cartwright had everything set. 2 squads of heavily armed special ops, brought in quietly via helicopter, joined forces with base security. Their plan: infiltration of the cave system under the cover of darkness, planting charges to collapse key tunnels. If any creatures resisted, they'd be taken down with lethal force. I insisted on being present. Cartwright tried to dissuade me, but I outranked her in official command of the base, so she had no choice. We departed in a convoy, 4 Humvees, each carrying special ops with automatic weapons, flashbangs and flamethrowers, in case the incendiary route became necessary. Dr. Yang came along, hoping to salvage at least one living specimen or negotiate some form of nonviolent approach. Reyes led the security detail. Duke was recovering from the prior night, but insisted on joining to direct us to the main cave entrance. We arrived at the canyons after nightfall, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. A heavy stillness blanketed the desert. The air smelled of ozone, as if a storm was brewing in the distance. The squad split into two columns, creeping up to the hidden entrance. My heart pounded. I'd commanded missions overseas, faced insurgents, seen men die. But this felt different, like stepping into a horror film. We were intruders in an alien domain. The first few meters of the cave were empty. The stench of decay thickened the air. Our flashlights illuminated scattered bones and fresh claw marks. Every step echoed in the gloom. The special ops team advanced with disciplined precision, scanning every crevice. A hush fell, broken only by our boots on stone. Then, near an inner cavern, the lead point man froze. He motioned for us to kill the lights. We complied, switching to night vision. In the shadows ahead, something shifted. A cluster of glowing eyes, dozens, arranged along the cave walls and ceiling. My stomach lurched. This was no small clan. It looked like an entire colony of these bat-like beings, perched or clinging to the rock. They remained eerily still, as if studying us. Cartwright hissed into her mic, "Deploy the flashbang." One operative lobbed a canister into the chamber. It exploded with a deafening crack and blinding light. The cave erupted in chaos. Shrill screeches rang out from all sides. Creatures launched into the air, their wings beating frantically. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes strobing the darkness. I saw shapes dart overhead, claws flashing. One landed among us, knocking an operative to the ground. Another creature slammed into the wall, disoriented from the flashbang, only to be cut down by gunfire. The entire chamber turned into a storm of wings, bullets, and echoing shrieks. Flaming arcs burst from a flamethrower, lapping at the limestone walls, sending up clouds of smoke and dust. I heard Dr. Yang shouting, "Stop! You'll kill them all." But her voice was lost in the cacophony. Amid the havoc, I glimpsed a creature that seemed larger than the rest, perched on a ledge, bellowing instructions with guttural clicks, almost like it was commanding them. Could these beings coordinate? If so, then we were engaged in a skirmish with a quasi-intelligent colony. Cartwright's team pushed deeper, planting C4 charges along the load-bearing sections of the cavern. Over the radio, she called for the final fallback. As we started retreating, several creatures lunged in desperation. One soared over me, nearly clipping my helmet. I squeezed off a burst of gunfire that tore into its wing membrane. It spun, crashed to the ground, and let out a pained wail, its bright yellow eyes flickering. Reluctantly, we pulled back to the mouth of the cave under protective cover. Explosions thundered behind us as the charges detonated in quick succession. The ground shuddered. A roar of collapsing rock boomed from inside, sending clouds of dust billowing out like a colossal beast exhaling. Flaming debris tumbled from the entrance. Screeches echoed and faded, buried under thousands of tons of stone. When the dust settled, an oppressive silence reigned. The main caverns were sealed, presumably entombing any survivors. It was impossible to tell how many might have escaped through alternative exits deeper underground. Many of us looked shell-shocked. Cartwright, though visibly shaken, maintained a stoic demeanor, quietly ordering an ops summary. Back at Ironwood, we had triage for our wounded. 2 special ops members had been severely mauled by the creature's claws, but they'd survive. We lost one operative in the chaos, never found his body, presumably dragged away in the melee. Dr. Yang treated the lesser injuries, but she was inconsolable, tears in her eyes. We had no right, she kept saying under her breath. Cartwright assembled me, Reyes, Duke, and a few others for a final debrief. She insisted we codename the entire incident Operation Iron Wing, classifying all records above top secret. She had a stack of NDAs ready, forcing every participant to sign. This incident did not happen, she said coldly. As far as official records are concerned, an earthquake caused a cave collapse in the southwestern desert. The base was not involved. When I argued that the creatures might still be out there, possibly in adjacent caves, she nodded. We'll monitor. If more sightings occur, a containment protocol will be reactivated. The emotion in her eyes, bitterness or regret, was fleeting, but it was there. This is bigger than Ironwood Base, Colonel. It's a matter of national stability. We can't have the public learning about these anomalies. Within 48 hours, Cartwright and her special ops team withdrew, leaving behind a short directive for ongoing patrols. HQ took a renewed interest in our security measures, quietly funneling in new cameras, motion sensors, and advanced detection equipment. They asked no questions about casualties or missing personnel. It was business as usual in the classified corners of the Air Force. A few weeks passed, and the base slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The perimeter remained on high alert. We had no fresh sightings. Some folks speculated the creatures, if any survived, had moved on. Others believed we'd wiped out an entire colony of advanced cryptids. Dr. Yang started having nightmares. She confessed she couldn't shake the memory of those anguished screeches. Reyes tried to put on a brave face, but admitted she'd never felt so unsettled in her years of security work. I put in for a psychological support program for the base, citing intense training exercises as the cause of stress. Officially, Ironwood maintained a facade. No leaks, no external inquiries. Local ranchers still complained about missing livestock now and then, but we'd brushed it off as coyotes or mountain lions. One evening, as I was wrapping up paperwork in my office, I found a small envelope on my desk. No markings. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, time-stamped from a perimeter camera the night before. It showed a silhouette perched on the southwestern fence, wings folded. The shape was distinctly humanoid, the eyes shining like tiny orbs in the gloom. A single line was scrawled on the back. They're still watching. My blood ran cold. Someone at the base had presumably retrieved it from the camera feed and left it for me. But who? I thought about telling Cartwright or HQ, but the last thing I wanted was another scorched earth mission. Instead, I quietly installed more cameras, more sensors, and kept the photograph locked away. I reasoned that maybe a few survivors lingered, observing from a distance. If so, they might be seeking a new territory or simply confirming we wouldn't strike again. I hoped it meant a stalemate rather than a new confrontation. Rumors about the big battle in the desert swirled at the highest levels. Certain generals I'd never met called to express vague gratitude for containing the situation. Others probed me about how cooperative Major Cartwright had been. My gut told me there were layers of clandestine politics behind the scenes. Competing agencies, each with their own interest in these cryptid or possible extra-human creatures. Ironwood might remain a watch site, or they might shut us down entirely. I half expected a relocation or reassignment. Instead, the powers that be simply extended my command until further notice. In subsequent months, I gleaned from stray intel chatter that sightings of bat-like humanoids had occurred near at least 2 other remote facilities in the southwestern region. The official stance remained denial. I'm convinced there's an entire shadow branch in the government dedicated to managing these anomalies, feeding the public sanitized stories, UFOs, wild animals, hoaxes to cover the truth. If that's the price for preventing widespread panic, I can somewhat understand. Still, I wonder if we're not playing a dangerous game, meddling with phenomena we barely comprehend. Commanding Ironwood Base after the bat humanoid incidents has felt like walking a razor's edge. We're sworn to protect the nation, but we also have moral obligations about how we treat life, even life that defies easy classification. The night we collapsed that colony still haunts me. Were they mindless beasts, or a form of sentient hidden species? Did we eradicate mothers, young entire family groups? The question gnaws at my conscience. Dr. Yang eventually resigned her post a year later, writing in a heartfelt letter that she could not reconcile the violation of ethical boundaries. Reyes stayed, but I see the weight in her gaze whenever we patrol the southwestern perimeter after dark. Lieutenant Duke recovered from his injuries and remains an integral part of our intelligence staff, but his once easy smile rarely surfaces. We're all changed by what we saw and what we did. From time to time, a sensor still pings in the desert at night. Usually, we find nothing, but occasionally, we catch a fleeting glimpse on a camera, a shape with folded wings perched on a rocky outcrop, watching the base from afar. Then it's gone. We do not mention it in official logs anymore. The hush order stands, but privately, I ensure our men keep a safe distance and remain vigilant. No more hunts. No more attempts at forced contact. I've come to believe that these creatures, or others like them, have roamed hidden corners of our world for centuries, emerging only when provoked or forced from their habitats. Our advanced technology, our secret labs, our relentless expansions into the remotest deserts might be driving them into direct conflict with us. And every time we respond with violence, we risk igniting a war we can't fully understand.
If you guys enjoyed today's stories, be sure to smack that like and subscribe button so you don't ever miss another episode of Secrets of the Woods. I'll see you all in the next episode.